The Indian concept of prana and the Chinese concept of chi are to be taken into account as examples of traditional terms referring to these subtle energies, or life energies. In these traditional disciplines, illness is seen as resulting from changes in the patterns of energy, and therapeutic techniques have been developed to influence the body's energy system. According to the ancient Indian Vedanta, this universe is composed of akasha and prana, as indicated by Vivekananda. Akasha is the origin of all the observable matter. And prana is the origin of all the natural fields along with vibrations, thought. This natural field includes the vital living force which, in turn, controls all the psychological as well as the physiological functions of all living beings of the universe. It is to be noted that this prana, the Indian concept of life energies, and this vital living force as well as the thought force is usually ignored. It is to be noted that prana approximately equal to vital living force, approximately equal to thought force in vitro and thought force in vivo and thought force micro and thought force macro. Explain vividly the existence of thought force in vitro and thought force in vivo and other characteristics of thought force. Is the physical body of a living being cause of manifestation of the soul or vital living force, called prana, the Indian concept of life energies? What makes this body? What force causes the atoms to combine in a specific sequence and takes up specific atoms from the mass of matter around us in order to provide different shapes of different species of specific bodies of living beings? It is logical to say that the force which makes up the matter and forms the body is the same force which is responsible for causing and maintaining the psychological as well physiological functions of the living organisms. This specific force is called prana, the Indian concept of life energies. The sum total of the energy displayed in the universe is called prana indicated. This prana is thought to be the universal power. The prana is the gross origin of all the fundamental fields, including the vital living force, which controls all the psychological as well as the physiological functions of all living beings of the universe. TCP is the force-carrying particle of the original thought force, which is the origin of all the existing natural fields. Thus, this prana is more or less equivalent to the original thought force, which is carried by TCP in the inherent presence of force presence. Does this prana generate consciousness? Or does the consciousness create prana? Are they interdependent or intradependent? It is apparent that the consciousness, being a typical form of energy, can initiate the function of prana. Life may be defined as a state of functional manifestation of consciousness that, in turn, is the quantized energy force of the thought. This khamsic force represents consciousness. As a separate entity, the prana as well as consciousness appears to be independent, or they may appear to be interdependent, but, after the initiation of the function of prana in a living organism, they are interdependent. Thus, when this specific vital living force is eliminated from the living organism, then that living being is said to die. Pal. 5, expressed that the thought force, being the primordial quantum field, functions as the original single primary unified field, that is not only the origin of all the four fundamental fields along with both the micro and thought macro, but also the origin of thought force in vivo. Thus, the original thought force, which is the primordial quantum field, and which is an expression of the universal consciousness, represents prana that, in turn, is the origin of all the natural fields, including the vital living force, and thought presence represents akasha. This prana is manifested as nerve current as well as the biological thought force also. And all the psychological and physiological activities are controlled and maintained by this same prana itself. The prana is the grosser form of the original thought force, thus its energy should be the quantized energy of thought force, as it is expressed by Prana through the evolution of universe from the void. showed that the quantized energy of thought cosmic presences is responsible to cause the universal consciousness as well as the cosmic microwave background radiation temperature. The individual consciousness owes its origin to the universal consciousness created by the same cosmic force is the energy responsible for generating thought force. This thought force being an expression of the universal consciousness is applicable to any inanimate object as well as to any biological system having thinking ability. Thus the thought force being an expression of the universal consciousness exerts its functions both in vitro and in vivo. The prana is the grosser form of the thought force itself with all its characteristics. Thus, all the functions of prana are liable to be governed by the quantum mechanical activities of these forces in the inherent presence of thought. This prana is the gross origin of all the prevailing fundamental fields along with the vital living force, which controls all the psychological as well as the physiological functions of all living beings of the universe. Thus prana, approximately equal to vital living force, approximately equal to thought force, TF, in vitro and thought force in vivo and thought, micro, and thought. The Indian concept of prana and the Chinese concept of chi are to be taken into account as examples of traditional terms referring to these subtle energies, or life energies. The sum total of the energy displayed in the universe is called prana. This prana is thought to be the universal power. Prana, pra, is the Sanskrit word for life force. In yoga, oriental medicine, and martial arts, the term refers to a cosmic energy believed to come from the sun and connecting the elements of the universe. The universal principle of energy or force, responsible for the body's life, heat and maintenance, prana is the sum total of all energy that is manifest in the universe. This life energy, prana, has been vividly invoked and described in Vedas. Tantra and Tibetan medicine pra-vayu is the basic vayu, wind, air, from which all the other vyas arise. As per the Bhagavad Gita, prana is not mere breath, it is more. First, we should not consider prana only in the context of physiological respiration, exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the lungs. It is life, it is movement, it is being, it is nourishing, it is the primal force, it is energy. Prana encompasses all energies discovered and yet undiscovered, it is thought, it is motion, it is gravity, it is lightning, it is energy in the atom, is the motion in the atoms, it is juice in everything. Any discovered or undiscovered energy in our body or in the universe is prana, call it by any name: respiration, nerve conduction, thought, gravity, magnetism. All forces originate from prana, and all forces subside in prana. Discussion: we have shown that force, the quantized energy of thought, ultimately represents consciousness. The same is the energy responsible for generating thought force. We have shown here a relationship between consciousness and vital living force, approximately equal to prana, and a relationship between the vital living force and thought force. Here vital living force, approximately equal to prana, approximately equal to thought force in vitro,